Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Going to spend some time with a man I consider a really brilliant legal mind. He's a regular contributor on The Price of Business, and that is Lee Kaplan, and he is with the law firm Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka, and that is skv.com. That's skv.com. And welcome, as always, Lee. Good to have you on.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Are you? You're actually in Houston for once.
I am in Houston. I've been traveling some on some arbitration matters, but I'm back.
Well, we're glad to have you back. Tell us a little bit before we get started with our topic today about SKV.
Well, our law firm has been primarily a civil litigation firm for commercial lawsuits, and we have a white-collar capacity that we have recently expanded. We have had two very fine lawyers who do white-collar criminal work join us, Sean Clark and Dane Ball. They are defending Captain Kaluza, the unfortunate BP employee who was on the rig, the Deepwater Horizon, for just a very short time, 3 or 4 days at most, before the catastrophe occurred. And the government is prosecuting him, and there is an appeal right now of a number of the charges that were dismissed by the judge. But if anything goes to trial, it'll go to trial in May. So we get involved in things that intersect criminal and civil law, such as internal investigations of practices that may be illegal, or various incidents where employees may be violating their fiduciary duties to the company by either taking kickbacks or favoring vendors who are not the high bidders or low bidders, depending, that sort of thing.
Is the case with the
both civil and white-collar matters.
Is the case with the captain, is that a criminal case?
It is. The United States decided to go after some of the individuals. Most of the individuals, frankly, who perished, or most of the individuals who might be accused of having been negligent or grossly negligent, are people who themselves perished. But one of the survivors, Captain Kaluza, is being prosecuted, perhaps two. There may be two cases. There was one earlier of a low-level onshore BP individual. I'm not sure where that case is, but Captain Kaluza had just come to the Deepwater Horizon shortly before the accident. Interesting.
That's very interesting. Though that's something I'll be interested in getting some feedback on as that goes along, as that progresses. That's a good future story. Talk a little bit about minority business shareholder rights in the state of Texas. My understanding is back in June. Was it back in June or in the past year? There's been a pretty big decision that's kind of changed that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, the decision was earlier this year by the Texas Supreme Court. It was a 6-3 decision, and it essentially overturned 25 years of precedent. It's a very, to me, surprising decision, and in that, the court basically said there's no common law right of a minority shareholder to essentially be bought out at a fair price or have other particular rights in the common law in Texas, and this was a new one. So it really puts the onus on people who are already minority shareholders to figure out a way to get treated fairly. And if you're about to go into some sort of business arrangement in a privately held business, you need to have protections written into the actual agreements, the corporation bylaws and shareholder agreements, so that you are protected. You can always contract to have more rights, but what you can't do is rely on the common law to say you have to be treated fairly.
Right.
So if management is if 2/3 shareholders are in management and they want to pay themselves a ton of money, it's very hard to do anything about that if you're, say, the 1/3 owner. And if they want to sell their controlling interest to somebody and you want to be taken along in some fashion, very hard to do anything about that if there's nothing written into the organizational documents of the corporation or the shareholder agreement.
It seems like the big winner in that is the law firms.
Well, actually, no, because it means there'll be fewer cases now.
Okay, explain that. Elaborate on that, because it seemed to me that that it would mean more legal work, at least on the front end, to make sure it was a document that the minority shareholder was going to like. But I guess there's going to be less ground for confrontation in the courtroom.
Well, there'll be far fewer lawsuits over this, and frankly, lawsuits are more costly than drafting the documents to cover all these rights. And I think this reflects the Texas Supreme Court's desire to just get the courts out of business. And frankly, I think this was a mistake by them, and a lot of the commentators think the same as well. If you're an out-of-state investor, you now know you don't have common law protections here, and you have to negotiate a lot harder at the front end to get documents the way you want them.
Okay.
I think it's a bad thing for the state. Now, you do have certain protections under the statute. For example, shareholders have the right to inspect the records of a company, assuming it's for a proper purpose. If you're a minority shareholder looking to inspect the records of the company to find out who all of its customers are so you can form a competing business, that would not be a proper purpose. But if you want to find out what people are being paid, what management is doing that might affect the value of your shares, you're entitled to that under the statutory law.
Interesting.
But in general, minority shareholders now have far fewer rights in Texas than they did a year ago.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. It seems like on the surface this is going to possibly attract more business to Texas, but might discourage more investment in those businesses. Is that an accurate potential
I think
response?
that's right. I mean, we don't really know the effect of it, but it does overturn 25 years of precedent, and it seems to me that courts shouldn't be doing that without a darn good reason. And as just an observer of business, from business litigation for many, many years, I haven't seen some compelling reason to do that. There aren't that many minority shareholder lawsuits, or haven't been, and the reason is because majority owners knew they had to give these protections to minority shareholders, and it was only the outlaws, or people perceived as outlaws, who got sued for mistreating the minority.
Seems like an odd decision from a conservative court that, and conservatives are always complaining about legislating from the bench. Seems like it was legislating from the bench.
Well, they did by changing the rules. I mean, you could say that the original decisions that have been followed for so many years were legislating from the bench, but they've become accepted over a long period of time. And this was a very unexpected and unwelcome change. And I think most business lawyers will tell you it means they've got to spend more time explaining to people what their rights are and or not, and the importance of getting things written down.
Lee Kaplan.
Lots of times you go into business with 2 or 3 of your friends and people you trust, and you don't realize that 5 years down the line, some people's needs may change. Somebody may need more money, and if they're in management, they may suddenly increase their salary from $100,000 a year to $400,000 a year. If you're a minority shareholder and you don't have the votes, there may not be much you can do about it. So they're just taking more money from the company to your detriment, and you're stuck.
Lee, I got to wrap it up. I'm sorry. Lee Kaplan,
That's all right.
And he's a phenomenal contributor here on The Price of Business. Love getting him on the program and giving you the opportunity to listen or to learn more about what he can bring. Smicer, Kaplan, and Veselka, that's skv.com. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you, best content here, including this interview, will be found over there at usdatareview.com, and this is The Price of Business.